Hello, and welcome back to another chat with the Valley Girls and our favorite local independent bookseller, Candace Rivera of the Book Nook in Warwick. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Candace.
Hi.
All right. So, as we are talking, it's 2 days after Christmas. We are coming up on the new year, and I know a lot of people have a New Year's resolution or just a goal for 2025 to read more. And so, we are here to help with that. Um, I it's a strange chat for me to have because going without reading would be for me like going without breathing air. And you obviously are a book person too, Candace. But I know for a lot of people, if you ask them, "Hey, do you like to read?" They'll say, "Yeah, I love to read." And then you're like, "What are you reading now?" Or "What have you read this year?" And they're like, "I haven't read in a while." And we're just really busy. And I feel like, Jenny, that's really, I know that you love to read. You've always been a reader, but I know that you feel like reading is just not something that you manage to squeeze into your busy
Right,
life a lot. So
right.
what goes on what happens between you ordering that book from bookshop.org and getting really excited and then real life intervenes?
No, I was gonna say life, right? Like that's what happens is life. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably the distractions of life. Like I always feel, and this is probably goes beyond just why don't you get to read as much as you do? This is more of like, like why do you procrastinate about things? This is probably like a therapy session for me. But it's really more about the distractions of life and prioritizing, like, oh my gosh, I always feel like I have a million things to do. I have a million things on my to-do list. And so if I have some downtime, I should really tackle these other things. So part of that really truly is the like, could I just like sit and veg and like, tune out the world and just go get buried in a book? Like, yes, yes, I can. That's called self-care. So really for me, it's self-care is always something that I don't want to say struggle with, but definitely something that I have to prioritize in order for it to happen, right? And so reading for me is kind of right along there with self-care of just make the time. Just say, yeah, for the next hour, like I'm just going to sit and chill and read my book. Sometimes I have a book on the nightstand, so when I get into bed, I'm like, well, that's it. That's what I'm going to do instead of playing stupid games on my phone or scrolling through my feed. I'm going to pick up that book instead of looking at the screen, and it is very soothing for me. And so by the time I get into bed and I start reading, I usually end up falling asleep with the book on my face. So, yeah, I think that's really it. It's just prioritizing it more during like daytime self-care time.
Yeah.
Um, and then other times it's maybe just getting to bed a little earlier so that I don't fall asleep if I want to read in bed.
Yeah. Yes, you are somebody who does so much for so many other people in your life. And so I know
Mhm.
self-care in general is a struggle for you. And I think that happens with a lot of people. We feel guilty, like stealing away with a book for half an hour feels like something
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, but somebody's waiting for me to get back to them on this. And I said I would do this favor for somebody. And so it feels a little bit selfish, maybe.
Yeah, it like just feels like
However,
luxurious.
it is luxurious. And I'm not going to geek out too much, but I did go into Google Scholar, which is my home away from home online. And I actually looked up psychological benefits of reading for mental
Mm,
health. And there are so many studies. I'm not going to go into all the studies and do stats at you guys, but there was one that the University of Liverpool did, and they found statistically significant improvement in depression amongst participants who took part in a 12-month reading group. There was another one that was conducted in 2021 with Turkish students, where the students who opted into a reading program where they read stories showed increased mindfulness, an increase in optimism, reduced depression and anxiety. So anybody else who's watching who's like Jenny, who feels like, oh, I have so many things to do for so many people throughout the day, and it just feels like I can't prioritize stealing away for half an hour to read a book. It really is. It's for your mental health.
it's that oxygen mask thing, right? Put your oxygen mask on before you help others. So it's just
Yeah.
one of those things that, yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, Candace, you talk to people all the time who are readers or aspiring readers. You own a bookshop. And so if people come in and say, I want to read more, but I don't know, I've gotten out of the habit of reading, Where do I start? What would you tell somebody?
Well, first I would tell them to read for fun because I think that, one of the reasons why so many people get into a reading slump or just kind of get out of it altogether is there can be this pressure to, well, if I'm going to read, I should read, only specific
The
genres. I should
classics
read,
or serious,
right,
something serious literature.
right. Yeah, exactly. And you know what? And that's fine. Read what's fun for you. But if you're a reader that says like, actually I really like romances. I
Hmm.
really like, horror. I really like mystery, that type of thing.
Yep.
Read what makes you happy. Read what brings you joy.
Yeah.
Even if it's something that you feel like, oh, well, if my family knew that I was reading this or my friends or whatever, so what? Like they don't need to know anything. Like this is for you. Read for fun.
Yeah.
No matter how silly you think the title is or the book or whatever, read for you. That would be my first thing. The second thing is to like figure out your why. Why do you want to read more?
Hmm.
Is it because you want to read more indie authors? Do you want to read other genres? Do you maybe want to like read more diverse authors?
Hmm.
And like it can be really fun because it is. Create your TBR list. Create your wish list of kind of like like who would those authors be?
Hmm.
What would those titles be? And then it makes it easier to kind of say like, okay, well, this month I really want to read book X, Y, and Z. Great.
Hmm.
Okay. I'll read a chapter a day. Or maybe I'll read, I don't know, 100 words a day. Something. Make it bite size for you.
Yep.
um, and also audiobooks are valid. So if
Yes.
your reading like includes audiobooks,
Yes.
listening to it like, during your workout or during your
Hmm.
commute or, whatever, that's great. Like that counts. It
Hmm.
really does. So I would say just do what's best for you.
It's so funny because I wrote on my card, I wrote, no rules, no guilt, any genre, any format. Graphic novels count, audiobooks count, children's
Mm-hmm.
literature counts, reading
Yep.
picture books with your kids counts. And
Yes.
also, my hot take, DNF is always an option. This is
Yes.
not school. If you start a book and you're 10 pages into it or 100 pages into it and you're like, this is not sparking joy, you can put it away. You do not have to
Mm-hmm.
finish it. There's no rule. No one is going to come to your house and punish you for not finishing the book. And so I always used to feel like, well, I started this book. I invested all this time and I'm 80 pages into this 250-page book. I really got to stick with it. Nope. Once you just like give yourself psychological permission to not finish any book that you are not loving, then I feel like then the world opens up to you.
Exactly. You're not going to get in trouble. I swear. It's
Yep.
fine. If you don't want to finish reading, even if you're like at a chapter in, it's just like, this is not resonating with me, it's okay. You can put the book down and close the audiobook. It's really fine and
Yep.
move on to something else.
I
Yep.
think that's such a valid point because getting back to like why don't I read as much as I want to? I think that that's a very big part of it for me is I'll start a book and then I'll be like, all right, I'm into it, but not that into it, but I really have to finish. And then it becomes another thing on my to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Like in order to
Hmm.
get to the next book, I have to finish this, but I'm so not motivated to read this book. So it like sits on my nightstand for a really long time. So that's a really, really great tip, I think, and I need to take that to heed myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also definitely audiobooks. I think that's a great tip because
Yeah.
I do listen to audiobooks for sure. I do that a lot. And then the other thing, you said something else that really, oh, the genre. Like, I think that that's something I love. I love fiction. I do. And that for so long, I felt like it's that productivity thing that I have where I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something productive and efficient.
You
So if I'm
always go for the self-help books. You're always
like,
reading the health and the nutrition. I can't remember last time you read a novel, actually.
right. Like I always go for something like, well, if I'm going to be reading, I might as well read about, I mean, me, of course, I'm going to read about health and that's my thing. So yeah, that's what I end up reading. And I don't I'm like, oh, am I gonna just not I don't it's not a waste of time, but in my mind, like I'm gonna kill time, waste time reading something that's not even productive or efficient, but yet I'll sit down and watch a movie for 2 hours. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So Yeah, I do need to think more about that, about like read for fun, read whatever you want to read, you know? And children's books are a big one. I mean, not that I sit by myself and read the children's books, honestly, but
You
you know, that
can. That
I know I
counts.
can.
That's
I
valid.
love, love, love some of the picture books we have for our kids. And I mean, they're grown now, but like we used to love just sitting around and reading these, and I would get so into it. So it's a really great point. I like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. So also, I love what you said, Candace, about reading more diverse authors. So you're, I like to read across genres, but you're probably going to have a genre that feels like home to you. Like I did not choose the horror life. The horror life chose me, right? But for a long time, then I realized like I'm reading all this like horror that's written by white male authors. You know, like everyone considers Stephen King the king of horror, and he's great. I love Stephen King, especially his short stories. But anyway, so I got really intentional over the last few years about reading horror written by more diverse authors, and there is some amazing horror coming from Black writers. I've gotten deep into Indigenous writers of horror. And so that's been really, really interesting because a lot of times, like, if you go to not the Book and Nook, but if you go to a traditional bookstore and you go to the horror shelf, it's going to be like 19 Stephen King titles and then like a couple of other little quirky finds in there. And so you might have to dig a little bit to find what you really love. But I would say recommendations are a great way. If you're like, hey, Candace, I've been in a reading slump, if I'm being honest, for a decade. You know, I haven't read since I had to for school. Here's what I used to love to read. Here's what used to really excite me about reading. And so what should I do now? So asking a bookseller is always a great idea. My life hack for pretty much anything is ask a librarian. If you ask a
Mm.
librarian, I want to get back into reading more and I don't even really know what I like anymore, she will you will make her week, right? Also, this is one of the times when social media is great. Between Book Talk and Bookstagram, there's so many book chats that are going on online if you're looking for inspiration. So one thing that I really like doing on Instagram, I follow my favorite authors. And so they're going to tell you when they've got something new coming out. Plus, so like in the horror community, especially, they're all kind of friends with each other. So they'll be posting about each other's work or they'll be like, hey, my top 5 works. And so I get lots of great recommendations that way. Um, so yeah, do you have like picks or recommendations if I come wandering into the store? Do you have like local favorites or a way that's easy for me to find some recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. So throughout the store, we have local authors um, that are featured,
Mm,
and there are plenty, and they run the gamut in terms of genre. I also love giving recommendations. It's the best part of my day.
mhm.
Um, you are never bothering me when you're asking me for recommendations. If anything, I'm like anxiously waiting because like
Please
I
ask me.
notice. Yeah, because I can see like if there's a customer, it's kind of like wandering through the store, like kind of confused of just like, oh, I don't know what's, especially during the holiday season, right? So like a lot of questions that I got was for middle grade books.
Mhm,
So especially for like the 8 to 12-year-old range, that's a really tough range to buy for sometimes.
mhm.
And so I would have like parents or grandparents, et cetera, saying, hey, I'm buying for a 9-year-old boy. He really loves to read about dragons. What would you recommend? And that's when I kind of go into like, well, the Dragon Masters series is great. Like he could really get into that. Maybe he already has, and kind of like go from there. Like I love it. And it also makes it so much easier for the person who's shopping.
Mhm.
So yeah, please do. Also, in terms of recommendations, if you're maybe too shy or you just don't know like what you want to read, we do something called blind date with a book, which is
Yeah.
literally we'll take a book, we will wrap it, we'll put a couple of hints on the cover. It comes with 2 stickers, 2 bookmarks. It's adorable, great gift. But it also kind of gives you like a sense of like, all right, I don't know what to read, but I see this blind date book. I see that, right now we have like a bunch of romance paperbacks that have been a lot of fun. Um, I want to try reading this romance novel. It's only $5. Great. That's something low pressure And that's a lot of fun too, because you don't know what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of different ways, but yes, I'm always happy to help.
I think a great recommendation that you just had was something I'd written in my notes too. If you want to get back into reading, you know you love reading, but you've just fallen off the wagon. Finding a series, I think, is a great tip. Like, I know a lot of people my age who would say they love to read, but hadn't read much for pleasure in a long time. And that a Court of Thorns and Roses series, the Sarah J. Maas stuff, hooked a lot of people back into the reading life. And so I love that for people. I think short stories are great too. I love a compilation of short stories. There's some really good ones that you can find. Like, there's often just an anthology of the best short stories of the year. And so that's like, you can feel like you've read a whole story, but it might be 10 pages or 12 pages or 6 pages. And so you can do it in little bite-sized chunks. I also think this is one for you too, Jenny. I know that. So one of the books that we loved together was Wintering by Catherine May. And so I love that format of like the personal essay memoirs that are also a little bit inspiring. I just recently read A Comfort of Crows, A Backyard Year by Margaret Renkl. And she's like, throughout the year, she talks about the way that the bird life and the garden in her backyard evolves, but then she's also incorporating reflections on her life, which reminds me a lot of A Reservoir Year by Nina Schengold, which we featured Nina on our holiday episode. So every day for a year, she took the same walk around the Ashokan Reservoir, and she wrote about her reflections. And she says, I took the same walk every day for a year, but I never took the same walk twice because it was always different and I was different and the seasons were different. And so she talks about her natural observations, but then also what's going on with her. And I love that kind of stuff. All right. I want to talk about book clubs. But before that, I do have one other really concrete recommendation for people who are like, yeah, this is all great, but like, it doesn't help me. If you're somebody who really needs structure and accountability, my favorite podcaster, besides us, obviously, like the person who made me fall in love with podcasts is Gretchen Rubin. And her podcast is called Happier with Gretchen Rubin. And so every year she'll do some kind of different challenge. And so for 2025, she's doing Read 25 in 25. And so it's a group challenge, totally free to participate. And they've partnered with bookshop.org, which we love, to do this challenge. And so the goal is to read 25 minutes a day, every day in 2025. And there's all kinds of resources available. I will put the link in the description. So there's reading lists, there's challenges, you can chat with other readers. And so if you're a person who likes that kind of accountability, like, well, I'm part of this challenge and I'm doing this with all these other people. And, Gretchen's always talking about tips and they talk about it on the podcast all the time. So that's a really fun way, I feel like, to join that. Also, if you don't like having a set time commitment, I would say you could just spin that off onto your own and make it your goal to read 25 books in 25. Oh, speaking of which, I love tracking my books. I am the dork who will share my Goodreads list. And I also keep, because I'm paranoid about things getting lost in the cloud, I don't know, I also keep a written list. So I don't necessarily review or rate, but I keep a list of everything that I've read. Do you have a place, Candace? Okay, so I've been on Goodreads for years and years. I know a lot of people are kind of migrating to Storygraph. Do you have an app or an electronic place that you like to keep track of your annual reading?
So not really, to be honest. I think like the most that I keep track is through Libro.fm through the app, because I like to listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Me too.
Especially when I'm working in the store, I'll put on my headphone and I'll be listening to it in the background. So that's kind of like how I keep track of a lot of my reading, because through Libro.fm, through the app, you can put marked as finished, you can see what's downloaded, you can see all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I am also someone who doesn't like to kind of like put a lot of pressure on myself to read a certain amount during the year. Yeah. I read for fun. I also read for the store to see like, okay, there are these really cool books that are coming in. Like, I'm going to read at least a couple of pages, even if it's not my thing, if it's not my typical genre, just so I can have a sense of what it's about. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe that will be my resolution going into the new year, where I will get into an app and say, okay. But yeah, at the moment, I'm just kind of living freely right now. But
I like that too.
And that's great for you because you're also not the kind of person who needs external accountability to read. You're gonna read. You're gonna like the thought of not reading is not realistic for you. So I love that. And again, the very first thing you said is read for fun. It should be fun. And so if it starts feeling like a chore, if it starts feeling like, oh gosh, one more thing I have to do. I'm so tired. I did everything today, but I got to check this off my list that I read my 25 minutes. Then don't do that. Don't do that. Also, last thing before I ask you guys to talk about the book club is you said audiobooks, which I also love audiobooks. That is another good way to get back into reading if you've been away from reading for a while. I think celebrity memoirs that are read by the author are a really fun way to get back into reading. So for a long time, I was like, I don't like books on tape. I don't know. I just thought it was not
Books
for
on
me.
tape.
Well,
I
because
love
that's
it.
what they used to be, right?
I
Like
know,
if you were growing
absolutely.
up, it was for
Absolutely.
like maybe if you were elderly, then you would get a book on tape. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that, but I just was like, why might I get a book on tape? Anyway, then I started getting podcasts. And so the first audiobook that I ever listened to was Tina Fey's memoir, Bossy Pants, and Tina Fey reads it. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And actually, now that I said that, I haven't listened to a celebrity memoir in a while. No, that's not true. I listened to Michael McDonald's memoir this summer. But and he read it, and I love Michael McDonald. He's like my spiritual guru. But anyway, that's a really fun thing. Like, it doesn't have to be serious. You can listen to Britney Spears' memoir. That is a totally valid reading experience. You do not have to listen to Tolstoy. You can listen to Tolstoy if that's what you love. But anyway, it should be fun. But I think especially if you are a person who wants to socialize or you want to feel like your reading is in some way productive, you can join a book club. So then it's a social experience. It's a night out. You have accountability because there's going to be a date for the book club discussion, and you've got to get your stuff done and show up. And we're super excited. The Valley Girls are excited to partner with Candace and a local author that we love and have had on the podcast. We're doing our very first book club. So
Yay.
Jenny and Candace, you can talk about that because you guys are going to be on site for this event, and I'm going to be running it virtually. So anybody who cannot be in Orange County can also stream the event and participate.
Yes, we are super excited. We have Brian J. Cano, who wrote the book Grains of Sand. He was on the Valley Girls Halloween episode, where he talked about paranormal research and the Haunted History Trail of New York State, being the ambassador of that, and all the cool, creepy places that he's been at. So Grains of Sand is a phenomenal book about his sort of journey back into the paranormal, where he, used to believe when he was younger, and then as he got older, or I should say like more like teen years, young adult years, like, I don't know if it's really legit. And then, little by little, each grain of sand was another story or some anecdote, something that was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And individually, they didn't mean a lot. But when they piled up at his feet, all those grains of sand sort of brought him back into the realm of, oh, there's something to this, and I want to look more into it. So he went from believing to a skeptic, back to believing. So, as Jen pointed out in the podcast, it kind of went from being Mulder to Scully back to Mulder. Little X-Files reference for you X-Files people. But it was great. So that's what we're reading for our February 6th book club. And Brian will be there in person signing books. If you cannot be there in person, we will be everything will be streamed. That's where Jen comes in. Everything will be streamed. And we're having it at Silvio's Villa in Warwick. And we are pairing up with Candace. We're teaming up with Candace to host this. Very exciting.
I can't wait. It's going to be a great conversation, and I'm so excited to talk to Brian about this and about his journey because the Hudson Valley is super haunted. There's so much history that sometimes we don't even realize that we pass every day or we drive past every day. So I can't wait. I can't wait to talk to him, and thank you so much. This is such an exciting partnership. So this is a great start to the new year.
It's so fun. So, I mean, Brian's been all over the world. He's been on several TV shows. He currently has a gig on Paranormal Caught on Camera where they'll show found footage and he'll comment on it. So it's very cool. But yeah, he is the ambassador for New York State. And so he knows all about the local history and just not scare anybody away. But if you like this Silvio's Villa, which is a great Italian restaurant, it's right there in Warwick, is also a stop on the Haunted History Trail of New York State. So you might have an unexpected guest at the book club. But so, all right, I will make an admission. I'm not much of a book club person. I like to read at my own pace. The most that I will ever do is read a book with one person. Like Jenny and I read Wintering by Catherine May together, and we would just be like, hey, let's talk about that next chapter next week. That's about it for me. And then usually those book clubs turned into like therapy sessions because we would both highlight the same passage and we're like, you know what that reminded me of. So, and that's great and valid, but I'm not great at reading at the pace of other people. So, but Candace, you've done a lot of book clubs with the community that you're building there at the Book Nook. So if people are like, I've never done a book club or I haven't done a book club in a while, but this sounds interesting. This is a good way for me to start the year. What are some of your tips for participating in a book club?
I find one that, that works for your schedule. So for our book club, for example, we alternate dates depending on the month. So sometimes we'll have it on a Thursday night, other times we'll have it on a Saturday night, and that alternates month by month. So find one that works for your schedule. And two, find one that, is going to focus on the genre that you're looking for. So like for us, we focus on the new releases that just came out for that month or maybe the month before, so that it's something new for everyone and we're all reading it together. But maybe you're looking for something that's like, well, I actually want to look for like a thriller book club. Great. There are so many out there, and there are so many that you can join virtually. You don't have to join in person. You could also start one with your friends, and it could be really as simple as just like, hey, do you guys want to come over for wine? I just found this really cool book. Like, I know we all have like the same interests. Like, let's read it, and then we'll come together in like 2 weeks. Great. Like that is now a night out with your friends. That is a night of self-care. And it's also a night of fun. And Jenny, like what you were saying, of just like it kind of turns into a therapy session. Those are the best book clubs because you're making that connection and you're sharing, and it doesn't feel like a chore, or it doesn't feel like like you're in a position of like vulnerability. It's something that's just like we're all here to kind of like to open up and talk about this book and how it made us feel. And those are the best book clubs. And, I always tell my book club members, like, hey, if you didn't finish the whole book, it's okay. As long as you're fine with spoilers and us talking about it, fine. If you only got halfway through the book, great. Come anyway. Like it's really okay. Life happens, or maybe you just didn't like the book and you want to talk to other people and say like, hey, am I missing something? Like, why did you like it or did you not like it? And it's just kind of like a nice way to come together. So I would say, find something that really speaks to your interests, and anything that you kind of feel like, okay, this is a lot of pressure, just do something that finds you joy.
And also, it's usually you pick a book and then you talk about it with your friends or people or people at your library group or whatever. We are lucky because we often get to talk to authors. Personally, you always have local authors who come into the shop, and we've gotten to talk to a lot of authors for the podcast. And so I feel like what we're doing with our February 6th book club, which actually is a Thursday and it's at 6 p.m., just to make it a little bit more accessible for people. I mean, come on the way home from work, whatever. But having the author there himself is very cool to be like, hey, I didn't understand this part, or I wish you had talked more about this part. I mean, that's okay too. Like, don't come to heckle, but you don't have to come and just be like, "Thought your book was the most amazing thing I've ever read in my life." You know, he's got thick skin. He can handle it. If you're like, "Hey, this story didn't make any sense. Can you expand on that?" Or, you know, what about this? That's okay. You can bring any of those questions. It's okay to have constructive criticism even at book clubs. And like you said, you can show up even if everybody else is like, oh, "This is the greatest book. This is the Reese book club of the month," and everybody's swooning over it. But like, "Oh, I don't get it. What's good about this?" That's okay too. I mean, you know, don't like kill the vibe of the book club, but it's okay to have a dissenting opinion on what you read, and you can still learn from that. Or you can just, like you said, you can read the first 3 pages and be like, this book isn't for me, but I still want a glass of wine and I want to go see my girlfriends. That's okay too. So
That's great.
I feel like the bottom line is it should be fun. And so I hope that you will take something away from this chat about how to just feeling inspired to get back into reading more in 2025 in whatever way that works for you. And just remember, it's supposed to be fun and there's no rules. You can read whatever you want. In fact, Gretchen Rubin, again, she's a part of a number of book clubs, and more than one of the book clubs that she belongs to are adults who get together and talk about children's literature, because that's a passion that she has. It's just something she really enjoys. And I feel like, especially with like the state of the world, maybe sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm going to read The Wind in the Willows and just like have a cup of tea and a blanket. And that's okay. It can be very emotionally comforting too, to just read something that doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be the new release everybody's talking about. It doesn't have to be something that's on the high school recommended reading list. It can be anything that makes you happy. And if you don't know what makes you happy, call Candace and she will find you something that makes you happy.
Love it.
Yep.
So excited for February 6th. Can't wait.
All right, we'll put a link to the event page, and you don't have to RSVP, but there's plenty of information there, and you can get the book from Candace if you like. Brian will have signed copies of the book at the event. And so if in the meantime you wanted to get the audiobook or an ebook, which ebooks count too, we love ebooks. That makes them more accessible. I get ebooks and audiobooks from my library. Ooh, gosh, I forgot to say Libby. The Libby app. Almost certainly your local library will have Libby. And it's an app on your phone. You can borrow audiobooks. You can borrow ebooks. It's super easy. You literally cannot forget to return it, because 14 days after they lend it to you, they will just take it back if you haven't renewed it, or if it's not renewable because there's a waiting list. And I love to buy books. Obviously, I hoard books, but Libby has saved me a lot of money too. So if you're like, yeah, I want to read, but I can't be buying books all the time, you don't have to. That's what the library is for. And if you can't get to the library, you can get to the Libby app. So there's that. So anyway, if you want an audio or a digital copy of the book to read now, then you can get a physical copy of the book when you get there. And you can always call Candace, go on her website, or go to bookshop.org and then choose the Book Nook in Warwick, because bookshop.org works with indie bookstores across the country. So you can always choose your local favorite that you want to support, or you can choose none, and then they will spread the love across all the indie bookstores that they work with. So, yeah.
Great.
All right.
Hope to see you guys on February 6th. And yeah, thanks for chatting. You guys inspired me. I'm going to go read now.
Me too.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Candace.